Hi, fourth graders. Today we are going to talk about multiplication, and specifically, we are going to talk about multiplying by ones, 0, 5, and tens. So our I can statement for today is I can multiply by 0, 1, 5, and 10 by making mathematical connections. Some vocabulary that we are going to go over are factors and multiples. So factors are the numbers that we multiply to get our product. And product is the fancy word for the answer to a multiplication problem. We would say that 5 and 4 are factors of 20 because when you multiply them together, they equal 20. We could also say that the product is also a multiple of 4 and a multiple of 5. It would be the fifth multiple of 4 and the fourth multiple of 5. So there's also some symbols that we use when we are multiplying. The most common one that you will see is the X. So that would say 2 times 2 equals 4. You can also think of the X as 2 rows of 2. And you can also think of it as 2 by 2 when we start going into some more advanced multiplication. You also sometimes will see it as a little circle with a dot. You can also see it as an asterisk, which is that name for that little star-looking thing. Sometimes the X is going to be right next to the 2. And so this would be 2 times something equals 4. And that X here would be something that we call a variable because we're trying to figure out like 2 times something equals 4. That one we won't see very much this year. Another way you're going to see it as 2 with parentheses around another 2 equals 4. So it's 2 times 2 equals 4. So there are many ways to show multiplication. Today we will learn some strategies to help us think about multiplication in another way. So some ways that you already know about multiplication is the first one, arrays. So the rows have an equal amount in each row. So for example, here are 2 rows of 3. So that's going to be 2 times 3 equals 6. Here I have 5 rows and I have 3 on the top, which I'm going to get 5 times 3 equals 15. You can also think of multiplication as repeated addition. And repeated addition can be tricky when you're getting to bigger numbers. But it's a good way for you to think about what multiplication really is, because it's really adding many times. So 6 plus 6 plus 6 plus 6 is going to equal 24. But instead of doing that, I can also see that there are 4 sixes. And so I can say 4 times 6 equals 24. I'm going to get to the same answer. However, I'm just looking at it in a different way. I can also think of a repeated addition for 2 plus 2 plus 2 equals 6. But I also can see that I have 3 2's. So I can do 3 times 2 equals 6. Another common way to think of multiplication is to make equal groups. So this example you see on your screen, we have 4 groups of 7 in each one. So I can sit and I can count all the little dots, or I can think of some strategies to help me get there. So if I divided 28 and I had them in equal groups, I could think of this even as 2 plus 7 in a group, and another 2 plus 7, and that's going to, and I'm going to multiply by that, and I'm going to get 14, and I'm just going to do that again, and I'm going to get to 28. That's one way to think of it. You could also do a number line. So if I have 3 times 4, I'm going to jump up to 0 to 3, and then I'm going to do that 4 times. So on my number line, I'm finally going to get to 12. Now, there's also some tricks and strategies to kind of help you do your multiplication maybe a little faster than drawing out a number line or making groups. So when you think of some of these numbers, there's some little things you can remember. Our first one is going to be multiplying by 0. Okay, so on the left side of the screen, it says the zero property of multiplication says that the product of any number and 0 is 0, because if there's 0 groups of 3, for example, then there's nothing there. So notice there's nothing that they're putting on our hundreds chart. If I have 5 groups of nothing, it's going to equal nothing. So you can think of the 0 property as 0 always wins, because 0 is the hero. So the product, or the answer to any number and 0, is always 0. So something about multiplication is that is a pretty basic thing to remember. Whenever there's a 0 by itself, not a 10 or a 20, but I'm talking about a 0 by itself, your answer is going to be 0. Now, when we move up to the ones, I'm going to change my color here. The ones facts. So it says the identity property of multiplication says that the number of any number multiplied by 1 is that number. So we call it the identity property because it's kind of stealing the identity or the number. And so that's why you see this little thief looking guy right here. Okay, so we call him the identity thief. So if you look over on the left side, we see that 1 times 6 is 6. This is also an array right here. So we have 1 row, but we have 6 in each. Now over here, we have 8 times 1 is 8. So if I had 8 rows and 1 column, again, you're just going to have 8. So thinking about these as arrays can be kind of helpful. But whenever we have a number times 1, it's going to be that number. So if I were counting by ones, this is going to be kind of like a number line, because when we're counting by ones, we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. Now, these are your multiples of 1. So 1 and 5, these are my factors, okay? So if I had one group with 5 in it, or 5 groups with one thing in each group, I'm going to get 5 because I'm taking this number, and that's that identity property. Same thing with 1 times 6. I basically have an array or one group. Oops, I have one too many there. Okay. Okay, so then over here, I'm going to have 7 and 12 because I'm just taking that identity. And this product is the same as saying 7 is the 7th multiple of 1, because 1 times 1 is the first multiple, 1 times 2 is the second multiple, 1 times 3 is the third, 1 times 4 is the fourth, and so on. So these answers, okay, are the multiples of the original number that we are multiplying by. Now, if you know your ones, you also know your tens. So It's kind of like the identity property with ones. Mm, and we're just going to have groups of 10 instead. So, fancy way to multiply any number by 10, think of a number that is equal to that many tens. So, for example, if I had 10 times 4, we're going to get to 40. This is also the same as saying 10 plus 10 plus 10 plus 10. It's also, notice, it's one group, but just 10 times. So you can think 1 times 4, and that's going to get to 4. And then you are going to place that 0 over here. Same thing with this one over here where it says 7 times 10. So 7 times 10 is the same as 7 tens. And you can think of 7 times 1 as being 7. And we're going to place that 0 after it. So tens can be kind of nice to work with because we have been doing skip counting by tens for many years, and we're really pretty good at them. And because we're so good at them, we call them friendly numbers because they're like our friends. So if you look at this perfect 10 skating penguin guy, here's a little riddle thing. 10 is such a breeze to do, all because of place value. To quickly multiply by 10, put a 0 at the end. Now, I put a little note in here that says we don't ever say we're going to add a 0. So I've heard that many times before. Oh, we're just going to multiply and then we're gonna add a 0, but we're not really adding a 0 because that wouldn't make any sense because we really got to remember that we are doing multiplication. So make sure you're using the word put or place because the word place is really what that 0 is holding is its place. So looking at the factors and the multiples. So this is the numbers over here. These are our factors. So the number at the front stays the same. And then the second number is going to be which multiple it is. So for example, if I were doing 50, I would say 50 is the fifth multiple of 10. Why? Because they are multiplying by 5, and it is the first, second, third, fourth, fifth number that we are multiplying by that original number 10. Now, if you know your tens, let me tell you, you know your fives, okay? So this is a really handy strategy that is really useful when you're trying to learn your fives. So I said that tens are a friendly number because they really are. They're numbers that are easier to work with. We've been working with tens. So one way we can also do is use that number 10, who is our friend. Oh, there's a smiley face. Okay, we can multiply by that number and then divide it by 2. So let's say your teacher gave you 5 times 6. And you're like, oh my goodness, I don't know 5 times 6. I don't know my fives. Well, you kind of do. You can think of, instead of 5, you can think of 10. And you can say, well, I know my tens so well, so 10 times 6 is 60. And you can think, okay, well, 5 is half of 10. So I'm going to take my 60 and I'm going to divide it by 2. And then I'm going to think what plus what equals 60. Okay. And we're going to figure out that 30 is going to be half of 60. Or you can do dividing 60 divided by 2. You can also skip count by 5, so 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, but that kind of takes a while, and sometimes when you're really trying to do your fives quickly, multiplying by 10 and then thinking what's half that number can be a little faster. So I will read this little riddle over here. 5 will yield the right amount if by fives you always count, or else just multiply by 10 and half will get you there again. So, a couple different ways you can do it, but you can also think of fives in a different way. Okay, so if I said, what is 5 times 5? Well, it's really 10 fives divided in half. So I would say 50 divided by 2 is 25. And actually, I can make a connection here because 50, you can also think about in money, is 50 cents divided by 2 would be 25 cents because you can think of quarters. 50 cents is 2 quarters. And so 25 would be my answer here. So you can also think, what is 5 times 8? It's 10 eighths divided in half. So 5 times 8 is really 10 times 8 divided by 2. And 10 times 8 would be 80 divided by, and then you divide that by 2, and you're going to get 40. So you can even go a step further on these challenges. So if you know that someone said 5 times 16, you're like, I don't know, well, do 10 times 16. And we know our tens properties, so we're going to do 16 times 1, and we're going to get 16. Place my 0, and I'm going to get 160. And then you could divide that by 2. And you know that 8 plus 8 equals 16, so 160 divided by 2 must be 8 with that 0 placed at the end. So, kind of fun when you really start to try to figure these out because you're not going to skip count 16 times and you're not going to skip count 48 times because that would take a very long time. Instead, if I gave you 10 times 48, you would have 480 because you did 1 times 48, place a 0, and you divide that by half. And we would know that 48 divided by 2 is going to be 24. Place my 0, get 240. So just a couple different ways to think about fives. And you can also think of fives on the clock. So because every number goes up in increments of 5. So 5 times 1 is 5. 5 is a really handy strategy, actually. 5 times 2 is 10. 5 times, change my color, 3 is 15, and so on. So a clock could be pretty handy. So if you think they all are actually multiplication problems. If you haven't noticed that before, it might change the way you look at the clock. There's a lot of lines there now. So a couple different things. You can also just skip count. So 5, 10, 15, 20. Now, instead of doing the skip counting, the next step up is to use the multiplication table. And note this is a ratio table too, another word for it. So if we have the number 5 and we multiply by the top number, we can do 5 times 3. I can use my skip counts to help me. So I could say, okay, first multiple, second, third, 15. I could do 5 times 8. I could also use my skip counts, or I could use a strategy that we were looking at and do 5 times 8 is really 10 times 8, which is 80. Slash it in half and we get 40. So we can do 40 right here and so on. So I'm going to continue, but that's how you do that. And when we're writing the missing factors, this is that word variable that we are looking for. So 10 times something is going to equal 50. But so I know because I've been using my skip counts and my ratio tables and my clocks. So 10 times 5 would be 50 and so on right here. 5 times something is going to equal 45. Well, I know that, let's see, 5 times 10 is 50. So I also see that's 5 less. So this must be 9, and then that would be 45. Again, here are those multiples. We have 5s and 1s, and these are our products. Okay, and these are our factors. And the second number is which multiple it is of the second number. So for example, I would say 35 is the 7th multiple of 5. Okay, so sometimes you're going to just get straight multiplication problems like we saw those, but sometimes they're going to give you some story problems. So this story problem says, Isaac bought 10 cartons of oranges. There are 8 oranges in a carton. How many oranges did he buy? So if I'm using my cube strategy, I'm going to circle my numbers. So I have 10 cartons of oranges and I have 8 oranges in each carton. I'm going to underline or highlight my question. So I'm going to underline. I'm going to box my keywords. So how many oranges? Okay. And I would also probably box up in a carton because we're going to have to figure out the total number of oranges, right? But this carton is a kind of important thing. So now we're going to evaluate and draw. So if he bought 10 cartons of oranges, I can do this in a couple different ways. I can draw my cartons. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. There are 8 in each. You can either draw the oranges or you can just write 8. Okay. And so you can either repeatedly add those, or you can think of this as 8. So there's 8 oranges, and there's 10 cartons. And so I want to know the total number of those. So I'm thinking I could do 8 times 10, times 10. And this is my unknown. I don't know what that is. Okay, so I can do my strategies. I can skip count. I can do 8 times 1, my identity property. I can place a 0. But I'm not done yet. I want to actually go back and double check that I did that correctly. So let me see. 8 dyed oranges, 10 cartons. Yep, I did everything that the problem asked me to do. Okay, I'm looking for, what am I looking for? Oranges. So this is going to be my label. Okay, I did it right. So my answer is going to be 80 oranges. Okay, now I'm going to take this same problem. So if we know that 80 oranges are in 10 cartons, now we are looking for 5 cartons. So Isaac bought 5 cartons of oranges. There are 8 oranges in the carton. How many oranges did he buy? And I'm just going to use what I already know because we did the harder work already. So let's see. Cartons of oranges. How many oranges did he? So if I know from my previous problem, because I'm just going to borrow what I already know, I know that, oops, I'm going to do this in red. Okay, so I'm going to do, so if we knew that 8 times 10 was 80. Now I'm going to try to think of, okay, what is 80 divided by 2 to get to 5? Because I really want to know, okay, because now I'm going to do half. Now it's a 5. So 80 divided by 2, you can think of what plus what equals 80. And if you know what 4 plus 4 is, you know what 40, then that 40 plus 40 must be 80. So 8 times 5 is 40, but I'm not going to stop there. I'm going to double check my work. And then I'm going to say 40, 40 what? 40 oranges. You're always looking for your variable that you're looking for. Okay. Oops. Okay. So, as you can see, there are lots of different ways to solve some multiplication problems, but these are just some different ways that you can learn how to do them a little faster and all those strategies and symbols. So, review factors and multiples. Factor times a factor equals a product, and the product is also considered a multiple of some numbers. We use various symbols, and there's a lot of different strategies for zeros, the zero property. Ones, the identity property. Tens, placing a zero at the end. Remember, not adding a zero. And fives is the half tens strategy. So I hope that helped you.